Thank you so much. A few years ago, I watched a movie that it turns out not very many people had seen, even though Brad Pitt was in it. The name of the movie was Troy, and it was the story of the Trojan War. Now, for those of you that saw the movie, you know that it started with an opening soliloquy by Odysseus, the king of Ithaca. And when I first saw this movie and I heard these words, they really impacted me pretty deeply. So in the spirit of Pioneers Festival, I thought it was appropriate to share them with you. Men are haunted by the vastness of eternity. And so we ask ourselves, will our actions echo across the centuries? Will strangers hear our names long after we are gone and wonder who we were, how bravely we fought, how fiercely we loved? Now, when I first heard these words, they impacted me very deeply. They made me question the technology venture that I was working on at the time. In fact, they made me question my entire career as a technology entrepreneur, and in fact, question my entire life. Had anything that I'd been working on up till that time really mattered? Would our descendants years from now still be talking about my accomplishments and my successes? Now, as all of you know, technology entrepreneurs are very driven individuals. We're driven by a number of ideas and concepts. We're driven by ideas like innovation, and not just any innovation, not just incremental innovation, but disruptive innovation. The kind of innovation that shapes markets, changes markets, in fact, creates new markets. We challenge ourselves to grow our ventures and grow them big and grow them fast. We even use words like high growth ventures. And we really push ourselves to design and build bold, audacious visions for our ventures. We challenge ourselves to really dream big. In fact, we challenge ourselves to dream so big that ideally, when we're successful in our ventures will fundamentally change the world. Now that sounds bold and audacious, and maybe even in this crowd at Pioneers Festival, maybe it doesn't sound all that different than what each of us is doing in our ventures. But I'm here to tell you that I don't think that's enough. I don't think that dreaming big enough to change the world for technology entrepreneurs is a bold and audacious enough vision. I think that for each of us, when we challenge ourselves to dream big, we need to challenge ourselves to even dream bigger than that. Don't just have a venture that will be so successful that it will change the world. Have a venture that when it is so successful, it will fundamentally change the course of human history. Now, the reason I say that, especially here at Pioneers Festival, is that I think we need to challenge ourselves to see if 500 years from now, when my home city of San Francisco looks like this, with floating neighborhoods and flying cars, will the inhabitants of that city still be talking about our successes and our accomplishments? Now, the reason I say this is because I firmly believe that today's global generation of technology entrepreneurs, and that includes every single person attending Pioneers Festival, has the opportunity to impact human history in a way that is completely unprecedented. I believe every single person at this festival has the ability to impact human history in a way even more profound than some of the emperors of ancient times, or even some of the masters of the Renaissance, which I think is appropriate here in Vienna, even more deeply than some of the philosophers of the Age of Reason, or the brave explorers in the Golden Age of exploration. I believe we have the power to impact human history in a way even more profound than the creative geniuses of the industrial age, or even something near and dear to my heart, the bold and daring geniuses who pushed the human species off of this planet and beyond. I believe every single person at Pioneers Festival has the potential to impact history even more profoundly than any of these individuals. Now, the reason I believe this is because I think we're living in an amazing time to be a technology entrepreneur. We're living at a time where we are beneficiaries of some massive global mega trends that are all coming together at the same time to lay a foundation for us doing something truly incredible and historic. We're living at a time of incredible global connectivity. And I don't just mean the internet, I mean telecommunications and transportation systems and connectivity of ideas. And this connectivity lends itself to allow us access to global markets in a way that no one has ever been able to access before. You layer on top of that at least a couple of megatrends that don't seem to have much to do with what we do for a living, but you have the opening up and liberalization of political systems around the world, and at the same time, the opening up and liberalization of economic systems around the world. And you put those together and you end up with something that is very prevalent here at Pioneers Festival, which is the global trend of the growth of entrepreneurship. All of that has led to the generation and accumulation of financial wealth that has been never seen before. And that wealth is being used to fuel this entire engine of megatrends. And you layer the one megatrend that's most important for all of us, you layer on top of that this global proliferation of technology that every day increasingly is impacting every single person on this planet. So when you put all those megatrends together and a bunch of other trends that I didn't even have time to put up here, what it amounts to is us living at an amazing time to be a technology entrepreneur. We're living in a time where we have the opportunity, if not the obligation, to challenge ourselves as individuals and as entrepreneurs to not just dream big and change the world, but to dream bigger and change history. Now, there's ways that I've tried incorporating this dream bigger, change history philosophy into my own career and into my own life. So about 15 years ago, I started my career as a technology entrepreneur, and over that time, I've worked with dozens of tech startups across the US, including Silicon Valley. And that led me to a point where I'm at today, where I'm working with a company called iSpaces, which by any current label, I guess you would call it a cloud computing company. But when iSpaces ultimately fulfills and succeeds in its ultimate vision, it will fundamentally change the way human beings connect with computing power. And in that way, it will fundamentally change even the definition of the word computer. About 10 years ago, I followed one of my passions to explore and commercialize outer space. I started an angel investor network called Space Angels Network, which basically focuses on early-stage aerospace companies. Through that group, I am today affiliated with a startup out of Boston called Spike Aerospace. And when Spike is successful, ultimately in its ultimate vision, it will fundamentally change the way human beings get from one point on the planet to another. About 5 years ago, I started following one of my other passions, which is the exploration of the world's oceans. And I co-founded a startup in Seattle called OceanGate. Now, when OceanGate is ultimately successful in its vision, it will fundamentally change the way humans access the deepest parts of the world's oceans. And then earlier this year, I started a company called Blue Marble Exploration. And when Blue Marble Exploration ultimately succeeds in its vision, we will fundamentally change the way the human species faces new and unknown territories and environments. So that's a little bit of how I've incorporated this dream bigger, change history kind of philosophy into my own life and my own career. But one thing that I've found as I've gone through this is, as interesting and as passionate as I am in these kinds of efforts, I've found that the kinds of things that my friends and colleagues around the world are working on make me pale by comparison. And what they do is truly inspiring and truly history-making. And we're very fortunate today to have two gentlemen join us who, when you hear their stories, you're going to be absolutely floored by what they're trying to accomplish and the audacity of their ventures. So with that, I'm going to introduce a couple of friends of ours here. On the far end here is Ariel Fuchs. He's joining us from France. His organization is called SeaOrbiter. And when SeaOrbiter is ultimately successful in its vision, it will fundamentally change the way human beings connect with the water that covers our planet. And next to him is Bas Lansdorp from the Netherlands. His organization is called Mars One. And some of you may have heard a little bit about Mars One already. But when Mars One is ultimately successful, it will fundamentally change the human species from a single planet species to a multi-planet species. So already, you probably don't even know what they do yet, and you can tell from that one sentence overview that these two guys are not your typical entrepreneurs, right? So with that, why don't I start with Ariel? Why don't you walk us through a little bit about SeaOrbiter?
Well, thanks, Guillermo. If I rephrase something that you just said is not only we want to change the world, but we want to envision our future. And basically, we want to choose our future and the one from our children. And personally, I'm not interested in having a planet with acid oceans and acid atmosphere like back in 3.5 billion years. So I'm interested into better understanding our number one key element of the planet, which is the ocean. And SeaOrbiter is basically designed for changing our vision onto the ocean and establishing a new relationship between man and the ocean. And we have known nothing about the ocean so far. I mean, we've done some very discontinuous science and exploration in the ocean. And SeaOrbiter wants to change that and go into a continuous observation, exploration model for the ocean. Basically, SeaOrbiter is, we would say, the International Inner Space Station, just to get into some space connection that we have all together here. It's a platform that will be designed to stay in the open ocean for months, years, and a very large extended period of time. So we better explore, we better understand, we better monitor the ocean, of which we know, again, very little in the deep sense. Ultimately, there's a lot of education behind this, of course. If we want to change the way people are looking at the ocean, we need to do a lot of education. And also, SeaOrbiter is meant for changing the way, again, we're looking at the ocean. The ocean is not this huge, vast, extreme environment where we can do anything we want, we can dump anything we like, we can take everything we want. It's a fragile environment, although it's huge and big and deep and covers 72% of the planet. It's still a fragile environment, and we don't know nothing about this. So basically, SeaOrbiter is about exploring the ocean on a very wide extent of time, from surface to the bottom, including having exploration devices that will help us to extend our ability to explore the ocean, having the ability to observe the underwater world from the underwater world, which means living inside the world we're trying to understand 24 hours a day, months, years again, with the ability to exit, just like in space, having the EVAs, extravehicular activities, and exit from the platform directly to the underwater world thanks to a pressurized module. This will change our way to explore the ocean. And you were talking about a shift in paradigm, and this will be a shift in paradigm into ocean exploration and mainly understanding the ocean in a better way.
Great.
Yep.
So why don't we have Bas?
Sorry.
Hold on.
Yeah.
So Mars One is a not-for-profit organization that wants to establish a human settlement on the planet Mars, which is, of course, thank you, a very ambitious plan. And thank you.
I've just quick comment. See, you better like space and Mars than the ocean, and that's critical. We need to change that.
So missions to Mars have the the impression of impossibility, because people have been talking about it for so long. And the reason is that when space agencies try to go to Mars, they think of, okay, what would we like to have? That's hot tubs and comfort and all kinds of things that you really don't need when you explore. Humans are explorers, and whenever humans explored this planet, they endured tough times. They traveled, they had a rough time because they were going to new places. And that's the way that Mars One is going to look at Mars exploration. So what we have done is look at the problem the other way around. We've looked at what technology is available. So what rockets, what life support systems, what robotic systems, what Mars landing systems are available, and can we design a reasonably safe mission to Mars using only these technologies, so no new inventions. And that's the plan of Mars One. I'm going to really quickly go through our timeline, but I invite everyone who's interested to just go to our website and find out all the additional information that's there. So we started Mars One 2.5 years ago, myself and Arno Wilders, my co-founder. Basically, when we found out how we could finance such a mission, and I think Guillermo is going to ask me about that, so I won't go into that detail. We've spent 2 years preparing, talking to suppliers, getting partners, ambassadors, advisors, all of these things in place. And then in April of this year, we opened our astronaut application program. And over the course of 5 months, we received applications from 200,000 people from all over the world who told us, I want to go to Mars. And very interestingly, because what I didn't tell you yet, is that Mars One is organizing a mission of permanent settlement. So these people are going to Mars for the rest of their lives, and 200,000 people applied for that. So in 2 years, we will have selected a number of teams of people who are qualified enough to go to Mars. We will train them in an Earth copy of the Mars outpost to prepare them for what awaits them. In 2016, we will have our first unmanned mission that will demonstrate some of the technologies that we need for our human mission. So extraction of water from the Martian surface, thin film solar panels, these kinds of things. In 2018, we have our first rover going to Mars that's going to drive around and find the best location for the settlement. In 2020, we have a number of missions going to Mars that will bring 2 life support units, 2 living units, supplies, and a second rover. And the rovers will move all these components to the right location because they will land kilometers apart. They will activate the life support systems. And when all these things are up and running in 2022, a small little space station will be assembled in low Earth orbit, composed of 4 elements, a lander, a little space station, and 2 propellant stages. And it will fly the first crew of 4 people to Mars. And they will land on Mars in 2023. Now, a mission to Mars will never be without risk, no matter whether we do it today, in 10 years, or in 50 years' time. But we have tried to make this mission as safe as possible, so a lot of redundancy in the design. And what's good is that the hardware for crew number 2 will arrive only a few weeks after the first crew, such that they have a lot of additional redundancy incorporated in the outpost. And in that way, every 2 years, we will send crews arriving every other year on Mars, and in this way creating a second society of humans in our solar system. Now that's Mars One. I won't say any more. As I said, go to our website for more details, and I'll give the microphone back to...
You can keep the microphone, I'll take the clicker.
That sounds like a deal.
So, as you can tell now, you heard a little bit about SeaOrbiter and about Mars One, and clearly these are not your typical startups. Clearly these are not your typical entrepreneurs, and clearly they really fully embody this whole philosophy of dreaming bigger and changing history. There are very few people I've met in my travels who are dreaming much bigger than these 2 guys, or whose ultimate success won't impact the course of human history much more than these 2 guys. So it's really great to have them here. So I guess the number one question I have, and probably on everyone's mind, and you already alluded to it a little bit, is, when I talk to entrepreneurs, one of the big challenges they always seem to have is funding. right? How are we going to raise money for this? And looking at what you guys are doing, that's got to take a lot of money. And where the heck is that money going to come from? You can't just go to your VC down the street and ask him for, to finance a mission to Mars or an ocean-going vessel like this. So, Ariel, what's the funding situation look like for SeaOrbiter, and how are you guys going to do this?
Well, talking figures, I mean, SeaOrbiter is a 40 million euros operation. We have secured half of it so far. That had helped us to secure the engineering, do the testing, all the modeling, and so we are pretty much ready to get into a shipyard. But to get into a shipyard, we need to secure the other half. So, which is roughly we'll need looking for 15 million euros extra. So still to find 15. So most of the funding we had was provided by private sponsors, Swiss watchers, not to name them, but also private investors from the engineering and the industrial world, the maritime companies. Nothing from, of course, governments and other administration, not even Europe. Too complicated for them. They didn't get the picture. And I think the main problem of running such an operation and ambitious project, and probably Mars One is the same, as evolving into a world where we have lost our sense of exploration and our vision. And it's very hard to talk to people that have no vision. It's very hard to convince them that there's a world out there, which means in the long term. Because mainly we realize when you talk to people that we're asking for fundings, they are only driven by the short-term model. And exploration is just the opposite. Exploration is long-term vision, long-term investment, and probably no return of investment. Although we have a return of investment model because we can demonstrate that as much as space, ocean exploration can bring to the trend of new technologies, bring innovations. Exploration leads to innovation. There's a very direct link for us and for you too. I mean, there's no exploration without innovation, but there's no innovation and exploration without vision. And a society with no vision is a society with no future. So, running operations like Mars One and SeaOrbiter, I think the most challenging problem we have is getting to talk to people that have this vision and are able to meet the challenges of exploration and long-term exploration. It's not a transatlantic race. We're talking about a mission that will last for 10 years in a row. Mars One probably even more than that, 50 years. And we expect to put not one SeaOrbiter in the ocean, but we ultimately want to have 6 of them in each major ocean, each major sea, just to make sense in building this network of sentinels that will help us better understand the ocean model that we need. So
for the whole fleet of 6 SeaOrbiters, what's the projected cost for something like that?
Well, it's it's 6 by 40, so it's about the extra cost counting 150 million euros.
So you don't gain any economies of scale by building all these out? No?
Yeah, well, we're much focused for the first one,
right.
and it's hard enough to get funding for the first one. But sometimes we get people in the way that says it's easier to get 150 million euros than just 40 euros for one sentinel. But so far we didn't success in that model.
So Bas, how about you with Mars One? That's got to be an expensive startup that you're working on.
$6 billion US dollars. So that's quite a lot of money. For a space project...
How many of you are raising $6 billion right now? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
And I didn't raise my hand either, unfortunately. We're still working on that. What we want to do, if I flatten it down completely, it's crowdfunding a manned mission to Mars. So a lot of people in the world are interested in getting humans to Mars. Actually, especially in the US, There's the Orphans of Apollo. It's even a movie called that. People who have witnessed the moon landings and were really excited. 20 years we're on Mars, and now it's 40 years later and we're still not on Mars. And there's a lot of people frustrated with the progress of the governments in manned space exploration, especially. So when we started Mars One, we actually started receiving emails. Can we please donate? So that's one of our funding models, is getting people in the world to pay a little Mars tax. So if 1% of the people on this planet pay $1 per month, we can go to Mars. And at least 1% of the people is genuinely interested in what we do, and some of them donate more than $1 per month. So another lack of our financing is not the big masses and the small numbers, but the small numbers and the few people with large numbers of money. There's 200 billionaires in this world that can finance this mission to Mars from their personal wealth. So we're networking our way into that, but it's a really hard networking game. Then there's a very important part of our finance model is if you have the attention of so many people in the planet, you can talk to sponsors and you can talk to broadcasters. So that's a very important leg of the financing that we do. Then there's intellectual property. With each supplier that we close an agreement with, we become co-owner of the intellectual property, such that in the long run, new systems will be developed in recycling, in solar panels, and the kinds of things where you didn't expect the innovations. And in the long run, that will generate revenues for Mars One. And finally, investments. So we're talking to a few very large investment groups. These are very long-term negotiations, as you can imagine, because it's a large sum of money that we're looking for. But they are genuinely interested in our business model. Usually they're not just interested in our business model, but also the kind of people that have vision. So there are some people left, fortunately. But it's true that it's difficult to find people willing to support such a big project. And it's easy to say, yeah, it's not possible, or it's why would you do it, or there's enough problems on Earth, why would you go to Mars?
So it sounds like, I guess Ariel alluded to it, and then you just expanded on it a little bit, but it sounds like obviously you've got fundraising issues just like any other entrepreneur on a much bigger scale. What have been the biggest challenges besides fundraising that you've had to deal with as entrepreneurs? And Bas, maybe you can start with that a little bit.
I elaborated on that a little bit in my first sentences. When you talk about a mission to Mars, people think NASA, Battlestar Galactica, hundreds of billions of dollars. And with that kind of image, it's really difficult to put yourself down as a serious player who can really do it for 6 billion, because 6 billion sounds like a lot of money, but it's actually for space exploration, it's almost nothing. The Curiosity rover cost $2 billion US. So it's a third of what a human mission to Mars would cost. So I think the image of the cost of space exploration is one of the biggest issues. And the way to solve that, of course, is to avoid any politics, use only existing technology, and make sure that you do it in the... It's always complex to go to Mars, but in the least complex way possible.
Right. Well, let me actually shift gears, Ariel, with you. Kind of coming away from SeaOrbiter itself and kind of coming to you as an individual, right? And Bas, I'll probably ask you the same thing, which is, each of us as entrepreneurs takes different paths through our life to lead us to the point of wanting to start these kinds of ventures. I don't think any of us have led lives that have led us to the point of these ventures like what you guys are doing. So what is it that led through your life that got you to the point where you are now and got involved with SeaOrbiter?
Before answering that, I would jump to Bas' comment on the billions and billions that have been spent in space industry, and that's our main problem too. Yeah. Because when you think of it, I mean, billions of dollars have been spent into space exploration since the years 50s. And not only 1% of that has been dedicated to ocean exploration. And that's our major problem too. I mean, we need to change that. Because again, I mean, the problems are here. I mean, we need to go further beyond, and explore the space limits, but we also better need to understand our own challenges on Earth, and ocean is the main challenge for the future. Remember, ocean give us food, oxygen, energy, regulates our climate, and as a source of future innovation that hasn't been discovered yet. If we put that at risk, we're putting our societies and our future at risk, and that's a very important thing to understand for the SeaOrbiter concept. Having said that, I was raised by the sea, always been into the sea. I'm a marine biologist by training, and I work with Cousteau, and I was really aware very soon that not only I had to understand the challenge of the ocean, but I needed to share that, and testifying was more important than researching. And then I started to change my career into journalism, because suddenly I had a feeling that it was more important to alert the people, sensitize the people, educate the people, and so the tools that I was using, instead of using the microscope, I was using a camera, and instead of writing into scientific publications, I went to newspapers and magazines, and I think that's work more challenging even than doing research. But the tool that we're using was not big enough, and I think SeaOrbiter is the ultimate tool to get into this sensitization process, the education process we need to go through if we need, again, to meet our challenges for the future.
So for you, it just seemed like a natural evolution of your storytelling career?
Excuse me?
Sorry, go ahead, please.
Thank you.
So it seems like SeaOrbiter was a natural extension of your storytelling and
yes, it's natural extension of what I've been working for many years, and meeting this friend who actually brought this concept to reality. He's a well-known French architect named Jacques Rougerie. He has been into innovation for ocean for more than 35 years, building underwater habitats, innovative ships, transparent hulls, in order to better take people into the reality of the underwater world. There's no better way to educate than witnesses. If you witness, if you understand. Remember, Cousteau was saying, you don't protect what you don't love. And if you want to love, you need to observe, to admire, and that's all about, getting into the water.
Right. Bas, how about you? How'd you end up getting to Mars 1?
Coincidence. But I think it's always in some way coincidence. So I wanted to go to Mars since I was in university, and I figured I'm not an American national, so I'll never go through NASA. I didn't expect the European Space Agency to do it, so I just started designing my own mission to Mars back in university 17 years ago. Then I graduated. I worked at Delft University for some time. I started a different company, and every now and then Mars popped up in my head, and I worked on it, and I looked at my old calculations and ideas, until finally two American scientists wrote an article about how it would be much smarter to go one way. And one of my friends said, hey, they're stealing your idea. It's of course not my idea, because there's hundreds of people in the world who've had the idea of going there to stay. But that was for me the tipping point. So I called Arno, my co-founder, and we sat the whole day, because the only problem we had was finance, obviously.
The only problem, yeah. Okay.
Well, the biggest problem. And so we sat there the whole day looking into it, and I sold my shares in my previous company when I found the revenue numbers for the Olympic Games. The Olympic Games in London had revenues of more than $4 billion from broadcasting rights and sponsorships in just 3 weeks. It's an event that lasts only 3 weeks. If you can make, and a lot more people are going to watch humans land on Mars. Everybody watched Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin land on the moon. And there's 4 billion people in 2023 that have access to the internet. So when I saw the potential of financing this mission, that was for me the decision was really easy to leave my previous company and to start Mars One.
Yeah, it almost seems counterintuitive that making a decision to start a $6 billion venture is a no-brainer at some point. But
well, I think it takes a little bit of ignorance.
Yeah. All right, so we could probably talk for hours and hours and hours, but I know we're tight on time. I want to give each of you guys at least a minute to give some quick updates on some of the current events that are going on. So, Bas, why don't you start a little bit about what's currently going on Mars, regarding Mars One?
Yeah, a number of really exciting things. Of course, we closed our astronaut application procedure with 200,000 applications, so we're working on narrowing that down to a reasonable number of people who are probably qualified, and there will be more rounds before anyone gets to really go. That's a really exciting thing, and we expect to announce who's going to the next round by the end of this year. But really exciting, and it's still not public, so I can't say a lot. But in December, we will announce a contract with a new supplier for our first unmanned mission, so the preparatory mission. And that's going to be really exciting news because it's a very, very interesting contract, a very nice supplier, and of course, a very concrete first step of our big dream. So that's what's coming up. Excellent, congratulations. And Ariel, I know you've got a new crowdfunding campaign that you wanted to talk about.
Yes, of course. Well, SeaOrbiter is a very complex program that it's very hard to summarize in a couple of minutes. But you're most welcome, all of you, to get into the internet and visit our website, www.seaorbiter.com, of course. And if you want to help, thank you, Guillermo, for mentioning that. We've just launched today. That's a coincidence, but I think it's maybe a sign. We've just launched today our first crowdfunding campaign on Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. So if you want to help, you're most welcome to join us on Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and give a little bit of your whatever, help us. And I will just end this conference with a summarize say that we have for SeaOrbiter, which is if we want to make the ocean live into the heart of man, then we need to make the man live into the ocean. And that's all about SeaOrbiter. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Ariel Fuchs and Bas Lansdorp. Thank you.